Alright, let me tell you about this trip. I've always loved the mountains. My friends, too, are the kind of guys who'd rather hike than sit in a bar. Whenever we get a free hour, we find a way to add it to another hour, and then another, just to make time for the mountains. Our wives, though, they never support these trips, but they don't worry much about us either. Over the years, they've learned we really do go hiking. Not for beer, not for girls, just the mountains. But one time, something happened. We got lost. That had never happened to us before. Still, it wasn't the end of the world. We'd spent plenty of nights in the mountains. The problem this time was we needed to get to a village to dry our boots. The ground was soaking wet and the boots, brand new mind you, turned out to be defective. The sole started leaking, a hard lesson learned. Always wear tried and true gear in the mountains. We knew there was a village not far, about 1 kilometer away. We could even see its lights. All we had to do was get down the slope. Simple, right? But the further we went, the less it made sense. The village wasn't there. The lights, they were gone. We all saw them before. It wasn't our imagination, but somehow they just disappeared. We wandered for hours. That's when Mike, one of my friends, said, "It's like the forest is playing tricks on us." He'd heard stories of people being led by something in the woods. Eventually, we ended up deep in the forest, far from where we meant to be. There was nothing else to do but make camp. We lit a fire to dry our boots, opened a can of stew, and had dinner. Afterward, we set up the tent and were just about to call it a night. And that's when we saw him. A young man walked out of the woods. He stunned us so much we didn't know what to say. He wasn't dressed for the forest, not even close. He was wearing polished dress shoes, a bright white shirt, the kind that almost glows in the dark. He said he was lost. But then he said something that froze us in place. He told us he'd been wandering there for 14 years. We didn't know what to think. Was he joking? Or was he serious? The thought made our skin crawl. There was no way that could be true. No one could survive in the forest dressed like that for 14 years. Then he asked for something simple. A pen or a pencil. We always carried stuff like that. It's handy when you need to jot something down on the trail. He introduced himself as Alex and asked us to write down a name we didn't recognize. "Go to the village in the morning," he said. "Find this person, tell them to come and get me, please." We didn't ask him why he couldn't do it himself. Fear, I guess, kept us quiet. There were so many questions. Was he out of his mind, running from something? But he was calm, polite even. He refused our food, didn't want an extra sweater, even though it was cold, and he was barely dressed for it. We went to grab some warmer clothes for him anyway, but when we turned back, he was gone. The next morning we made our way down to the village, following the exact same path we'd taken the night before, and this time, the village was there. We asked around about the name Alex had given us, and sure enough, it was someone from the village. We found the man, a guy in his 60s. His house and yard looked expensive, like he had money. We told him about Alex, how he was in the forest asking for help. He asked, what was he wearing? "A white shirt," we said. He told us he's been out there for 14 years. Of course, we don't know if that part's true. It sounds crazy, but he asked for you. The man went pale. He didn't invite us in. Instead, he told us to leave. "Get out of here," he said, "while you still can." We didn't understand, but we could tell he wasn't going to talk. Later, the villagers told us the story. That man, the one we talked to, was a local big shot. Rich, influential. Years ago, he'd been after Alex's wife. Then one day, Alex disappeared. The rumor? The man took Alex into the woods right after Alex's birthday and killed him. But no one could prove it. All they knew was that Alex was never seen again. It's been 14 years. Officially, he's just missing. His wife always said he left town and never came back. In July 2013, 66-year-old hiker Jerry Largay set out on what was supposed to be a routine trek through the picturesque Appalachian Mountains. But what started as an ordinary adventure turned into a heartbreaking tragedy. Her body wasn't discovered until 2 years later, just a few miles from the road where she could have been rescued. Before she vanished, Jerry took a photograph that would later be called the most haunting photo in the history of the Appalachian Trail. In the picture, she's standing near an old wooden cabin in an unknown location. It would be the last image ever taken of her alive. At some point during her hike, Jerry decided to take a shortcut and left the marked trail. Soon after, she realized she was lost. For 2 days, she wandered through the woods, desperately trying to find her way back. Her phone had poor reception, and the messages she sent to her husband, George, were delayed. When George stopped hearing from her, he alerted the authorities. What followed was one of the largest search efforts ever conducted in the region. Police officers, park rangers, firefighters, and even search planes scoured the area, but all they found was the spot where Jerry had taken her final photo. Weeks passed, and with no new leads, the search was called off. Jerry was officially declared missing. For over 2 years, her fate remained a mystery until the fall of 2015 when a Navy officer stumbled upon her abandoned campsite, just 2 miles off the Appalachian Trail. Next to Jerry's remains, searchers found her journal. On the cover, she had written, "George, please read this. Love you." In her entries, she described how she tried to survive for 26 days, struggling to keep track of time and her surroundings. One entry, dated August 6, 2013, contained a heartbreaking message for whoever would find her. "When you find my body, please call my husband George and my daughter Carrie. It will be the greatest kindness to let them know I'm dead and where you found me. No matter how much time has passed, please find it in your heart to mail the contents of this package to one of them." Her final journal entry was written on August 18, 2013. Tragically, Jerry had been just a 30-minute walk from the road where help was within reach. At the time of this story, it was January 2016 and I was 16 years old. I had been in and out of several rehabs for troubled young men. You see, when I was 15, I started abusing drugs and got into a pretty toxic relationship with a young girl. I spent 7 weeks in a mental hospital before I was transferred to a wilderness treatment program in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Georgia. These mountains were pretty scary to begin with. Some of the FBI's most wanted fugitives were supposedly hiding out in these mountains, plus the whole atmosphere was just creepy and spooky. Most of us were a little terrified of sleeping alone, under a tarp every night, in total darkness. It was an intensive program. We had almost no possessions, and there were definitely no luxuries in tents, even in the freezing winter temperatures. We didn't have flashlights or anything to protect ourselves. Okay. Some nights, we huddled around the campfire, all 10 of us or so, and the staff who stayed with us in the field told us scary stories of things they had witnessed while working on Second Nature. They were all very scary, and they told it with conviction, so I believed every one of them. But there was one story that really stuck with me. It was about a woman they knew who reported a strange event while hiking in the countryside. She was all alone and walking to a beautiful waterfall near a place we called Abigail's Place, which we called it for a reason. Another staff member saw a little girl while he was walking, which basically meant taking a shit. Before he could get to the right spot, he saw a young black girl about 30 feet away. She froze when she saw him, as did he. As he watched her, he said that after a few seconds, she put her finger to her lips, made a hissing sound, pointed into the distance and said Abigail, before running away. Instinctively, the officer turned on the radio and asked the other groups in the area if they were missing a girl named Abigail. An escape attempt was not that uncommon. Every group said no, they had no one missing, and no one named Abigail. Pretty creepy. But anyway, she was hiking near the entrance to Abigail. It was a little late and the sun was setting, so she headed up the trail, hoping there would be a place to camp and sleep. About halfway down the trail, she saw a doll. She thought it was strange, but not entirely unnatural. There were a lot of kids who liked to visit the old churches and cemeteries scattered around the mountains. She went to pick it up, trying to clean up the trail and keep it looking nice. She bent down to grab it, and it was immediately thrown back 3 feet into the bush. Creepy as hell. She took out her flashlight to investigate what was going on, hoping to find which stupid kids were doing this. She pulled out her flashlight and shone it on the doll, revealing the string tied around the doll's neck. Creepier still. Well, she thought, I'll find the kids who are doing this and maybe scare them myself. She took it as a joke and probably wanted to have some fun. She grabbed the string and walked over to the supposed kids, saying things like, okay, get out, it's over guys, and it's not even funny. She heard some footsteps in the bushes and someone said, okay, I'll be out. But it didn't sound like a teenager. It sounded like a grown man. She turned around and ran back to the trailhead. Needless to say, she found another place to sleep that night and never went near Abigail's place again. She called the local game warden, as well as the police. They searched the trailhead thoroughly, finding very little evidence until they came across a cave that looked like a hole in the rocks. I'm guessing it was hidden by the tall trees around it. Inside, they found some string, a garbage bag filled with rocks and sharp objects, a few old food cans, and you guessed it, a doll.